Hello there, my RPG lovers, and welcome to another video. Dragonkin The Banished is an upcoming action RPG developed by the studio called Echo Software. These guys are known for games such as Warhammer Chaosbane and How to Survive. Dragonkin is coming out on March 6th in early access on Steam, and I got the chance to try out the demo for this game, which is just a small part of the full build, but it was more than enough to get the feel of the gameplay and learn about some major features. The demo features a lengthy prologue and lets you play with 4 different classes, a hub area with just a handful of features that we can expect to see in the full game, and a limited game mode that's supposed to be in the end game. After I finished the prologue, I could choose to play with 3 different character classes, all with preset builds on level 35. I'm going to talk about my experience with this demo, and I'll give you my honest first impressions. Dragonkin has a decent artistic style, even though it's a bit generic. I think the game looks fine in general, but the visuals are nothing to write home about. When it comes to the performance, I had little to no issues with the frame rates. I was running the game in 4K on high and medium settings, and you can see my PC hardware on the screen. Even on high details and 4K, I was getting close to 60 FPS, but in order to ensure that will stay locked, I just put some settings to medium. I mean, this is just a demo, but this is a pretty good indicator that this developer is taking optimization very seriously. Let's just hope that the full game will have similar performance. The biggest problem I had with the graphics is the visual clutter. To be fair, most ARPGs can have similar issues in fights against dozens of enemies, and some of them try to solve it with various tricks, like adding an outline effect on your character. It also seems like the way the colors blend in this game only make it worse, but it's not a huge issue once you totally get a grasp of your character playstyle. When your muscle memory is on point with all the skills, you pretty much don't even need to look at your character. Still though, I would like to see my character stand out in the crowd somehow. I could easily see spell effects on the ground even in the most chaotic scenarios, I just couldn't see my character. I really just think they should add the outline visual effect that I was talking about. The prologue introduces you to the story and 4 playable characters in the game. The story is all about dragons. They have been banished and now they are corrupting the world. That's pretty much the whole gist of it, as far as I could understand. Listen, I love dragons as every other RPG fan out there, but these kinds of stories just scream generic fantasy 1, 2, 3. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, and maybe the full game features an interesting story, we'll see. The narrator will talk a lot in the prologue as you play, which I usually find annoying, but it's well done in this game, it's not tedious. You start playing with the knight class first, but as you progress through the prologue, you'll play with all 4 classes. I think this was a pretty cool introduction to the demo. You get just enough time with each class, and by the end of the prologue, you should know exactly which class you want to pick. They all have 5 different abilities, but the character progression system will offer you much more than that when the full game comes out. Even the demo has a lot of these items that help you customize your character builds. Pretty much all character classes in the game have the exact framework for the combats. You get a simple builder spell that regenerates your main resource, and spells that are spenders. Knight has some pretty cool spells like charging with the spear, using the spear as the flamethrower, huge AoE sweep, and so on. But like I said, you can loot more spells from enemies and create your own builds, but more about that when we finish talking about classes. Knight class is not something I would prefer in these types of games, but I think if you like poking things with a stick, it won't be a bad choice in this game, not at all. The next class you get to play in the prologue is the Great Oracle, who is basically your typical mage class. I really like her default builder spell, it has nice visual effects and it's satisfying to use. Quite possibly the most satisfying basic attack in the game. I think that if you want to create a very satisfying mage gameplay in these types of games, the mobility of the class should be very high and the controls should be very snappy. The controls could be a bit snappier in this game, but they're not bad. Mages are definitely not my preferable class in games like this, but I could see myself trying to experiment with different spells a little bit and see what this class has to offer. The next class in the demo is the Barbarian, and this is the class that I continued playing after the prologue. Surprise, surprise. The gameplay with the Barbarian is solid, and I find it the most enjoyable in general. Not just because I prefer these types of classes, but the combat feels the most impactful when using his skills. His default builder feels a bit clumsy, but he also has a cool Frost Leap, a very powerful Ground Slam, and of course a Whirlwind. Although I must say that this spell could feel much better. The animation for it is kinda slow, which makes moving the Barbarian in a Whirlwind a bit sluggish. The Barbarian class outside of Prologue is a much better version of this because his build is more defined, and I'll talk about that in a minute. We have to mention the last class in the demo, that will be the Hunter. I like this class quite a bit, and I would probably play it just as much as the Barbarian. The thing is, the Hunter is not an available class in the demo, you can only try him out in the prologue. Once again, it's your typical ranged character in an ARPG. You shoot things with arrows, you can shoot multiple arrows at once. The strongest spell is the Rain of Arrows, and you have some melee attacks as well. Simple? Yes, but pretty effective and fun. And unfortunately, they decided not to include him in the demo. Maybe he's just not finished, I don't know. So what about the feel of the combat in general? Well, it's pretty solid, but far from being amazing. It's good for what it is, and I can definitely see myself going through the campaign at least once. Not sure if I would stick around for those endgame systems, and I'm going to talk about them soon, but I'll reserve my judgment for the full release of the game. The thing is, when you start comparing the combat to some other similar ARPGs that people like to play nowadays, you would probably not rank this game very high. I would say it's mostly comparable to Last Epoch, and not only when it comes to the combat, the maps are kinda similar as well. Not in a good way if you ask me, because they're pretty linear and not so fun to explore. I'm talking about the levels in Dungeons Purification, which is the only game mode in this demo. I have no idea how the map is going to look like in the campaign. Maybe it's way better, maybe not. We'll have to wait and see. Even so, I can think of at least a couple of ARPGs with much better map design in dungeons. Now, you could ask a legitimate question here, like, C4G, why the hell would I play this over Path of Exile 2 or some other ARPG like Grim Dawn, Diablo 4 or even Last Epoch? Well, Dragonkin has some interesting features that are certainly unique, although they are not present in the demo. I'm talking about a special feature that allows you to build and manage your city. The city is your hub area, and they said it's going to be very important, and it's not hard to see why. You can find various NPCs that offer you different services, start a group play, change the difficulty, and so on. Speaking of the group play, the co-op is going to be in the game, but I think they said it's coming out at a later date. The hub area will also be used as the gathering mode for co-op. It will be cool to see how much these city features are actually affecting your gameplay. Like I said before, I mostly played with the Barbarian after the prologue. You get a preset build with a level 35 character, a lot of spells and procs and whatnot. This is where you find out that you also get a small wyvern as a pet, which is actually very important in combat. You can customize the pet by visiting a certain NPC, and you can find and use wyvern spells to put in your skill tree. So now would be the right time to mention the skill tree. There are no preset skill trees in this game, you get to make your own skill tree, but first you need to loot these items from fallen enemies. Then you get to play around with this grid, where you can mix and match different spells. I played ARPGs before that had a similar progression system like Undecember and Meta Ghost The Breaking Show. It's certainly an interesting progression system that's highly customizable, but we don't have an idea how good it's going to be and how strong is the spell variety. Judging by the demo alone, it's going to be pretty deep, because I managed to find quite a bit of different spells for the Barbarian. One of the biggest features of this progression system is something called Symbiosis. You need to have a spell with at least 8 modifiers, which will then trigger these effects. This basically connects you with your little dragon buddy, and you get an extra elemental effect on top of the spell with more damage. Think of it as your ultimate ability. Besides that, you also get some stat points to invest in various passive effects for your class. All classes have the ability to dodge, which is on cooldown. You can only spam dungeons in this demo, which are basically Diablo rifts. They are supposed to be randomly generated, and I assume the full game will have much more variety. The demo, on the other hand, only has a handful of these dungeons, and you can see and experience everything after a couple of hours. The enemy variety is not great in the demo, but what worries me the most are the boss fights. Once again, this is only the demo, and maybe I'm being overcritical here, but there is not a single boss fight in the demo. That could be a red flag. Well, come to think of it, there are bosses in the demo, if you count these dragons at the end of the dungeons. In order to get to that point, you have to fill up this bar by killing enemies in the dungeon, and then you get a teleport that throws you into another area with a timer. You have to survive long enough until the dragon shows up. What makes your life miserable here is the pillar at the middle, which casts some offensive spells at you. These dragon bosses don't even seem to have any special mechanics, maybe one or two at best, but that's about it. They are like elite enemies rather than bosses. The early access version of the game is supposed to feature 3 different endgame modes, and this is only one of them. I kept repeating the dungeons and trying to find more variety, but it's almost always the same at the end, with some slight variations. I truly hope the full game will feature some proper boss fights, because it will take a lot more than this to make me even consider playing the endgame. I have no doubt that the campaign will feature bosses, but you have to wonder how good they're going to be, because this demo is certainly not a good indicator. Listen, I'm not being a dick here, I truly want this game to succeed, because that means I'll have another ARPG where I can invest hundreds of hours of my life. But I'll also be happy if it's just a solid ARPG with a campaign that's worth playing. The last thing I want to mention is the itemization. It seems like your typical ARPG stuff. Items have different quality levels, and there is one major stat called score that's supposed to be the most important. However, I find it a bit strange, because I could find items that offer my character some clear boost in major stats, and the score would be lower for some reason. It seems counterintuitive sometimes. The legendary items I found were pretty boring because they just give you more stats, nothing special about them. I think this game is going to focus a lot more on the progression system in this grid and these types of items, and keep the armor and weapons very simple. Don't quote me on that, but that's certainly what it seems, judging by this demo. I love itemization systems in ARPGs and visual progression, and Dragonkin has some cool looking armor pieces. The barbarian armor pieces are kinda lame in this demo, but I did see a lot of cool armor sets in various game trailers, so I hope for the best. Oh yeah, the developer said there are 0 microtransactions in this game, which is definitely a huge W. The sound effects are serviceable, and there is some nice attention to detail here. For example, in this underwater level, all sound effects become muffled, as they should be in this kind of situation. I thought this level was very freaking cool, and I hope we'll get to see more interesting and unique levels like this in the full game. To sum it up, I definitely think this ARPG has potential, and it's not fair to judge it by the demo alone. On the other side, the core gameplay mechanics and the feel of the combat will probably stay almost identical. I think the gameplay is good enough even if it stays the same, but those other major features like the campaign, bosses, itemization and the endgame are worrying me a little bit. The classes have interesting abilities, and the progression system itself could have a lot of depth, which opens up the possibility to create unique builds for each class. I hope to see some strong enemy variety in the early access version and the full game, which this demo certainly lacks. I know I had a lot of criticism for this demo, but I would suggest waiting for the early access version and my full review. Anyway, tell me what you think about this game. Does it look good or bad to you? Leave a comment down below. Make sure you subscribe and help your boy reach that 100k subscribers. I'm getting very close. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more content like this. And if you want to go a step further, consider supporting your boy by becoming a YouTube channel member or a Patreon. Huge thanks to all my current supporters, and I'll see ya in the next one.